I should have known something was off the moment I stepped into the building. It was subtle at first, a small pause in the rhythm of my morning, an odd stillness in the air that didn't belong there, but I brushed it off. I'd been tired, after all. The night before had stretched too long, and I'd slept too little. Everything felt slightly out of focus, like my mind was half awake and half dreaming even after the alarm had dragged me into the day. But as soon as the elevator doors slid open onto my floor, that uneasy feeling sharpened. The office looked the same as always, rows of cubicles glowing with the soft blue haze of early morning monitors, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air, and the steady hum of the air conditioner overhead. A few people were already at their desks, moving in that slow, autopilot way of early shifts. Yet when I walked in and said my usual morning, something strange happened. Nothing. No one looked up. No one nodded. No one acknowledged me at all. At first, I told myself they were just tired. Distracted. But then I saw Lisa, one of the most talkative people in the office, someone who would always wave at me even on her worst mornings. She walked right past me, eyes on her phone, without even the slightest flicker of recognition. It wasn't that she ignored me, it was that she didn't see me. A quiet ripple of unease spread through my chest. I reached my desk and set my bag down, waiting for that moment of grounding, the sense of returning to my usual place. But it didn't come. My desk looked untouched. Too clean. Like no one had been sitting there at all. Even the chair was slightly pulled out, the way it had been before I ever joined the company. My coffee mug, a mug I kept on my desk every day, was missing. Okay, I whispered to myself, forcing a small laugh as I booted up my computer. Weird morning. That's all. A notification popped onto the screen asking for login credentials. Simple enough. I typed in my username. Asterisk error, username not recognized. Asterisk. I stared at the screen. I typed it again, slower this time, making sure every letter was right. Asterisk error, username not recognized. Asterisk. My chest tightened. I tried my work email. Same result. It was as if my entire digital existence in the system had been erased. I looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to talk to. My manager, Ken, was at his desk, hunched over his notebook, flipping through pages in that absent-minded way he often did. I walked toward him. Hey, Ken. Can I ask you something real quick? He glanced up, and then past me. His eyes skimmed over the space where I stood, landing on the wall behind me as if I weren't even there. I felt a chill run through me. Ken, I said again, louder. Look at me. Nothing. He turned a page in his notebook and scribbled something down. Ken. I snapped. He didn't flinch. My voice wasn't reaching him. Or worse, asterisk, it was asterisk, and he didn't recognize it. I stepped closer, waving a hand right in front of him. No reaction. It wasn't until his phone buzzed that he finally moved, picking it up and answering with a cheerful, "Hey, Lisa." The same Lisa who had walked right by me moments before. It was as if I were watching someone else's morning. As if I didn't belong to this timeline at all. I backed away slowly, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. People walked past me, talking to each other. A few laughed. One guy carried a stack of papers right through where I stood, brushing me as he passed, but he didn't look at me. Didn't apologize. Didn't react. I was there, but I wasn't. I made my way to the break room, forcing my legs to move even though they felt like they were turning into water. Maybe someone there would see me. Maybe this was some weird misunderstanding I could shake off. But when I opened the door, I found the same thing. Two people I regularly chatted with were standing at the counter, stirring sugar into their coffee. I stepped inside, letting the door close behind me, and waited for one of them to acknowledge me. But they didn't. They laughed about something, a story I had heard before, one I'd been part of, actually. Only now, in their retelling, I wasn't in it at all. I wasn't in any of it. As I stood there, invisible among familiar faces, I saw something that made my breath catch. A photo pinned to the fridge, a group photo from last year's holiday party. I was in that picture. I remembered it clearly, standing on the far left, wearing a red sweater, smiling with everyone else. But in the version on the fridge, I wasn't there. The people stood in the same formation, the same smiles, the same background, but the space where I should have been was empty. Deleted. Erased. My pulse hammered as I stumbled back, gripping the counter to steady myself. Something was horribly, undeniably wrong. Either the world had forgotten me, or I had slipped into a version of the world where I had never existed at all. I left the break room and walked down the hallway, watching faces I knew pass by me without recognition. I tried saying names. I tried touching someone's shoulder. I tried raising my voice. Nothing worked. I didn't exist to them. When I stepped outside, the morning air felt different. Thinner. As if the world was stretched too tightly, every sound amplified except mine. I walked toward home, my mind spinning, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud behind me, as if the world remembered only that part of me, the sound but not the person. And with every block I walked, a question grew louder in my mind: if no one at work remembered me, and the system erased me, and the picture removed me, then what would I find when I got home? Would my neighbors know me? Would my keys fit the lock? Would there even be a place for me to return to? As I turned the last corner, dread coiled around my chest. My building loomed ahead, quiet, still, unfamiliar. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was walking toward home at all, or if I had already stepped out of the world where home ever existed for me. It happened on a soft, gray afternoon, the kind of day where the sky feels heavy and close, as if it's leaning just a little too far toward the earth. I remember thinking the air felt muted, like everything around me had been wrapped in a thick layer of cotton. Sound carried strangely, drifting and fading in ways that didn't quite make sense. I'd left work early and decided to take the long way home, wandering down streets I used to walk before life became a series of routines. That's when I saw her. She was standing in front of the old library, the one with the stone steps and the dusty windows. The building seemed almost abandoned now, but the memory of her standing there made the entire street feel suddenly familiar, almost comforting. She was wearing a light blue coat, *the light blue coat. The same one she always wore on cold days, the one she used to joke made her look like a misplaced cloud. For a moment, my heart lifted. I hadn't seen her in months, not since the last time we talked, not since the last time things between us felt real, solid. I'd been rehearsing 1,000 things I would say if I ever ran into her again, wondering how she'd react, if she'd smile, if we'd slip back into the easy warmth we used to share. I slowed down, watching her as she brushed her hair behind her ear, the same absent-minded gesture she always did when she was thinking. Something inside me warmed, softened, settling in that deep, quiet place where old memories sleep. "Hey," I called gently as I approached, my voice barely louder than the whispering breeze. "I didn't expect to see you here." She lifted her head. And she smiled. But something was wrong. Her smile was soft, polite, the kind you give to a stranger passing you on the sidewalk. The corners of her mouth curved just right, but her eyes remained still, empty, searching my face with no flicker of recognition. Not even the faint spark of confusion someone might show when trying to place a familiar face. Her eyes didn't know me. It was like looking at a photograph of her instead of the real person. Every detail was right, the shape of her face, the softness of her hair, the way her hands folded lightly at her waist. But the warmth, the spark, the familiarity, it wasn't there. Her body was there. Her voice was there. But she wasn't. "Oh," she said quietly. Hello. The word felt wrong, like it had been pulled out of her by obligation rather than recognition. She looked at me the way you'd look at someone who had mistaken you for someone else. Polite. Slightly detached. A little wary. "It's me," I said softly, a nervous laugh slipping out. It's me." She gave that small smile again, gentle, apologetic, and shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said. "I think you're mistaking me for someone else." My breath caught, and I felt something inside me sink. The street seemed to tilt slightly, the cold air wrapping around my spine. I took a slow step closer, my voice barely above a whisper. No, I know you. I know you." She took a step back. "Not out of fear, out of discomfort. The way you step away from a stranger who's crossed an invisible line." Her eyes flickered with something like concern, but still, nothing. No recognition. No familiarity. Just distance. I felt a chill spread through my chest, slow, heavy, settling like fog filling a room. For a moment, I wondered if I was the one losing my memory, if something in my mind had twisted reality into something it wasn't. But I knew her. Every detail. Every memory. Every moment we'd shared. "You look pale," she said softly. "Are you all right?" There was warmth in her tone, kindness even, but it wasn't the warmth she used to give me. It was the kind she gave to strangers, to lost people she wanted to help but didn't truly know. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "You really don't remember me?" She hesitated. And then, she shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I wish I could help." My chest tightened, and I took a shaky step back. The quiet street felt suddenly too open, too exposed. The breeze lifted her hair slightly, the same way it always had, carrying her scent toward me, faint, familiar. But nothing about her eyes changed. And then something even stranger happened. Her smile faded, not into confusion or concern, but into something almost startled. Her expression shifted subtly, her eyes narrowing just slightly, as if she were listening to something behind me. A faint sound, or maybe a whisper carried on the wind. She blinked once. Twice. And then her gaze drifted past me, over my shoulder, as though something there demanded her attention. I turned instinctively, but the street behind me was empty. When I looked back, she was gone. No footsteps. No fading silhouette. Just, gone. As if the fog rolling down the street had swallowed her whole. But the strangest part came after. As I stood there, heart pounding, trying to understand what I'd just witnessed, her voice drifted into the air around me, soft, thin, almost tangled with the wind. "I'm still here," the words brushed against my ear like a memory, familiar, warm, the real her. The her I knew. The her who recognized me. "Find me," and then the whisper faded, dissolving into the quiet street until nothing remained but the distant hum of traffic far away and the echo of her voice lingering in my thoughts like a ghost. She smiled at me. But her eyes didn't recognize me. And now I'm no longer sure which version of her I met, or which version of me she saw. I don't know what drew me into that cafe. Maybe it was the soft golden light spilling onto the sidewalk, or the way the warm air drifted out when someone opened the door, carrying the faint smells of coffee and vanilla and something almost nostalgic. It sat on a quiet corner I never usually passed, tucked between two old brick buildings with vines creeping up their sides. I should have kept walking, but something about the place tugged at me, gentle, familiar, like a memory brushing against my mind. I stepped inside. A bell above the door chimed softly, the sound warm and welcoming. The interior felt instantly comforting, dim lights, wooden tables, soft music playing somewhere in the background. A few people sat scattered around, murmuring quietly or lost in their laptops. Nothing unusual. Just a quiet cafe on a quiet street. But the moment I walked in, something shifted in the air, subtle, like the soft hush of a room holding its breath. The barista behind the counter looked up. She smiled, polite, warm. But it seemed to stretch a little too long, like she was studying me. Like she knew me. "Good morning," she said brightly. "Your usual?" I blinked. "My usual?" I repeated, trying to laugh it off, but the sound felt thin. She nodded. "Of course. Medium latte with a splash of cinnamon, 2 pumps of caramel, extra foam. And a blueberry scone. Right?" My heart dropped into my stomach. That was my favorite order. Exactly. Down to the unnecessary but comforting splash of cinnamon and the extra foam that made it feel more like a ritual than a drink. But I'd never been here. I'd never seen this place. I had no idea who this barista was. I opened my mouth to correct her, to say she must have mistaken me for someone else, but the words wouldn't come. Somehow, saying it felt wrong. Instead, I forced a shaky smile. Why yeah. That's right." She beamed, ringing it up without hesitation. "Take a seat. I'll bring it over like always." Like always. I turned away, my heart beating too fast, scanning the cafe for some sense of grounding. It didn't help. The space felt familiar in a way that made my skin prickle, as if it had been cherry-picked from my memories. The soft lamps. The warm wooden floors. Even the painting on the wall, a watercolor of a rainy street, reminded me of something I couldn't place. I picked a table by the window. The surface of the wood had faint scratches, nothing unusual, but I traced them with my fingers anyway, trying to anchor myself. Then I saw it. My initials. Carved faintly into the wood. The carving was old, worn down by time, but it was unmistakable. My initials. Something I used to doodle on school notebooks, the habit long abandoned years ago. It was carved exactly the way I used to write them. Same slanted angle, same loop in the last letter. My breath caught. The room felt suddenly colder. The barista approached with my drink and scone. She set them down carefully, her smile softer now, almost sympathetic. "Rough day?" she asked gently. I looked up at her. "Do I know you?" She paused. Her smile didn't fade, but something behind it shifted, an expression I couldn't understand. "You come here often," she said instead, as if correcting me without wanting to embarrass me. "Every morning. Same table." She gestured lightly toward the initials. My throat tightened. I don't remember that." She held my gaze for a moment. Her eyes were kind, but there was something else behind them, something I couldn't read. "That's okay," she whispered. "It takes time." "Time for what?" I wanted to ask. I wanted to understand. But fear held the words in my throat. A cold edge crept down my spine as I looked around again. The other customers, were they watching me? It felt like they were. Not obviously, just small glances, familiar smiles, subtle nods. Like they all knew me. Like they were waiting for something. I forced myself to take a sip of the latte. It tasted perfect. Too perfect. It tasted exactly like the drinks I made for myself at home, down to the ratio of foam and sweetness. A flavor I'd never been able to replicate anywhere else. My hands trembled, and I set the cup down. The barista was still standing there, watching me softly. "Why don't I remember this place?" I asked in a small voice. She exhaled slowly. Not annoyed, sad. Almost grieving. "You stopped coming," she said. "After everything." My breath stilled. "After what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out, gently placed a hand on my shoulder, and said in a whisper that felt too heavy, too full of meaning, you're early this time." Before I could ask her what that meant, the room shifted, barely perceptible, like a ripple moving through the air. For a moment, the lights flickered. The customers blurred slightly at the edges. The faint hum of the espresso machine warped into a low, distant hum, like something on the other side of a wall. And then everything snapped back into place. The barista had stepped away. The other customers resumed their quiet routines. Nothing looked wrong. Except, my table was empty. The latte. The scone. Both gone. And where my initials had been carved, the wood was untouched, smooth, clean, as if no one had ever scratched into it. I stood quickly, my chair scraping against the floor with a sharp, jarring sound. I turned toward the counter. The barista was gone. Someone else stood there, wiping the counter. A man I'd never seen before. He looked up. "Can I help you?" What happened to the woman who was here?" She brought me my drink." He frowned. "No one else has been here this morning. Just me. We opened 10 minutes ago." I felt dizzy. The room seemed to sway. I stumbled back toward the door. As I pushed it open, the bell chimed. And behind me, from somewhere deep in the cafe, so soft I almost missed it, I heard her voice, "See you tomorrow." I didn't look back. I don't think I ever will. But every morning since, I've felt a strange pull toward that corner, and a faint taste of cinnamon and caramel on my tongue, as if I've already been there again. As if the cafe is still waiting. For me. I don't remember why I called home that night. It wasn't something I normally did, there was no reason to. I lived alone, after all. No one else had a key, no one else ever used the place but me. Maybe that's why it felt strange, even before the call connected. A small, unexplainable tug in my chest, a sense of unease, like something at the edges of my life had shifted just slightly out of place. It was late, later than I realized. I'd stayed at the office too long, hunched over spreadsheets while the sky outside darkened into a deep blue. By the time I stepped onto the quiet street, the night air felt heavy, cool against my skin. Everything was still. A kind of unnatural stillness that made the city feel abandoned, like the world had emptied itself out while I worked. I called out of habit, maybe. Or maybe out of loneliness. Or something deeper I didn't want to name. I pressed my home number and listened to the dial tone hum in my ear. 1 ring. 2. 3, then the line clicked. And someone answered. "Hello?" I froze. It was my voice. Perfectly my voice, the tone, the inflection, that subtle tired rasp I get after long days. I thought at first maybe the call had somehow looped back to me, like some glitch in the network. But no, I could hear faint sounds behind the voice. The soft clang of something metallic. The low hum of my refrigerator. The creak of the old hallway floorboards near the kitchen. My apartment. My voice. But I wasn't there. "Hello?" the voice repeated, a little sharper. "Is someone there?" My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. "Who is this?" I asked quietly. A pause. A long one, too long. As if the other person was turning their head, listening for something. Then my voice answered again, but softer this time, "You shouldn't be calling." Something cold crawled up my spine. "This is my number," I whispered. "You're in my home." "Who are you?" The voice on the other end let out a soft exhale, the kind I make when I'm frustrated or thinking too hard. It didn't sound like someone imitating me, it sounded exactly like me. The breaths. The little pauses. Even the faint tremor. Everything. And then it said, "I told you. I am home." My skin prickled violently. "No," I said, my voice shaking. I'm not there. I'm calling from outside. Another pause. Shorter this time. Sharper. Then, the voice said slowly, "Who am I supposed to be?" My throat closed. I took a step back without meaning to, the empty street suddenly feeling too big, too dark. "I don't know," I whispered. A soft laugh came through the line, my laugh, but wrong. Deeper. More hollow. "I've been here all night," it said calmly. "You left the light on. The hallway won. You always forget." I hadn't forgotten anything. I hadn't even been home to forget. "I'm calling the police," I said, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. "You won't," the voice replied, certain. "You never do." My mouth went dry. "Stop," I said. "Just stop. Get out of my house." The voice inhaled sharply, like it was preparing itself, bracing for something. Then it whispered, "You should come home." I felt the world tilt. "Why?" "So we can talk properly," it said. "So you can see what you've left behind." My heart slammed against my ribs. What did I leave behind? I asked. Silence. Then, a faint, rhythmic tapping. Like fingers on the kitchen counter. My counter. Then the soft scrape of the chair pulling out from under the table. I knew that sound. I knew the weight of that chair, the way it always snagged on the uneven tile. Then footsteps. Slowly approaching the phone. Each one sounding exactly like mine. The voice whispered, almost tender, "I've been waiting for you." My breath hitched. "Stop. Don't," but the voice spoke over me, quietly, with a calm certainty that filled me with dread, "You shouldn't be out there." I stumbled back, nearly dropping my phone. My pulse hammered painfully, my breath coming too fast. "You're not safe," it said. "Come home." "No," I whispered. "You're not me." A soft sigh, tired, disappointed, my sigh. "I'm who comes next." I couldn't speak. "And I need you," it said, "to let me in." The line clicked. Silence. I stood alone on the quiet street, the phone still pressed to my ear, the cold air biting at my skin. The city around me felt even emptier now, as if everything had retreated into the dark, leaving only me and the echo of that voice. My voice. When I finally mustered the courage to go home, the hallway light was on. Just like it said. And the front door, my door, was unlocked. I remember the corridor being darker than usual that night, darker in a way that didn't make sense. The lights overhead worked fine, they cast the same soft yellow glow they always had. But the shadows felt heavier, stretched out across the floor as if the building were exhaling slowly in its sleep. The hum of the elevator faded behind me, replaced by the familiar creaks and murmurs of old pipes running through the walls. It was all ordinary, but something inside me tightened with each step. I'd taken this exact walk 1,000 times, and yet, that evening, every step felt like I was walking deeper into a place I'd only dreamed about. I had stayed longer at work, again. It had become a habit in the past months, lingering in the office after everyone else left, typing slowly, finishing tasks that could easily wait until morning. I didn't do it because I enjoyed it. It simply felt easier to stay under the fluorescent lights, surrounded by the steady hum of computers, than to go home to an apartment that had grown quieter with each passing week. I used to like my home, the way the morning light spilled through the window, the quiet hum of traffic outside, the scent of the candle I always burned in the evenings. But lately, something about it felt different. Off in ways I couldn't quite name. When I reached my floor, the hallway was still. The rain outside tapped gently against the windows at the end of the corridor, an almost soothing rhythm. I took a slow breath and walked toward my apartment door, fishing my keys from my pocket. I wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just the routine of ending a long day. Turn the key, step inside, turn on the lights. Familiar. Automatic. But as I approached the door, something else happened. It opened. Not all at once. Just a slow, smooth movement, like someone inside had turned the knob and was waiting for me. At first, I told myself it must have been the draft. That was possible, wasn't it? Old buildings shift, settle, pull at hinges when the weather is damp. Doors open on their own sometimes. That's what I told myself. And yet, this didn't look like that. There was a steady intention behind the movement, as if the door had been waiting for me to come home and now, quietly, it was letting me in. I froze, my keys halfway to the lock. A faint light spilled out from inside, warm, soft, familiar. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, measured, someone walking inside my apartment with the confidence of belonging there. My breath caught in my throat as the footsteps approached the doorway. I stepped back slightly, instinctively. The door opened wider. And then I saw, me. Or rather, something that looked like me. Standing in my hallway, wearing my sweater, holding my house keys, with my tired posture and the faint crease on my forehead from a long day. It wasn't a perfect mirror. It was slightly wrong in a way I couldn't pinpoint at first, like a reflection that had been copied an inch off-center. But the resemblance was overwhelming. My heart hammered against my ribs so loudly I could hear it. The figure blinked once, slowly, calmly, as if it were surprised to see me standing there. A strange sensation crawled down my spine, like cold water dripping beneath my skin. The hallway around us seemed to contract, as though the air itself had grown denser. I opened my mouth to speak, to demand an explanation, but no words came out. I wasn't even sure what question I was supposed to ask. How do you ask someone why they're living your life when that someone looks exactly like you? My mind scrambled for logic, an intruder wearing my clothes, a hallucination from exhaustion, a trick of the dim hallway light, but none of those explanations fit. The face staring back at me held the quiet familiarity of every morning I had ever looked in a mirror. The way it held its shoulders. The way it breathed. Even the subtle flicker of weariness in the eyes. It felt like staring at a memory of myself rather than a person. The figure tilted its head slightly, studying me with the same confused curiosity I felt. That made something cold settle in my stomach. I had expected some kind of malice, or hostility, or fear from it. But instead, it simply looked puzzled. As though it couldn't understand why there were two of us. Behind it, I saw my apartment exactly as I had left it that morning, my shoes by the door, my jacket on the hook, the soft lamp in the corner casting that familiar circle of light. The faint scent of the candle I always burned lingered in the air. Everything looked normal. Comforting, even. But the longer I looked, the more I noticed small differences. The photograph on the shelf, slightly tilted. The blanket on the couch, folded differently. My mug on the table, placed at an angle I never used. Someone had touched my life. Someone had lived in it. The figure blinked again, slowly, and stepped forward. Not threatening, just a natural movement, as if it were approaching a visitor at its own front door. I stepped back instinctively. My hands trembled. There was something profoundly wrong in the air, something I couldn't name but could feel pressing slowly against my skin, my thoughts, my breath. The figure stood at the threshold now, just inches from where I had been planning to unlock the door moments earlier. It studied me with a calm, unfamiliar patience. I realized then that it wasn't afraid of me. I wasn't intruding in its life. It believed I was intruding in mine. A faint whisper drifted through the hallway then, so soft I couldn't tell if it came from inside the apartment, outside, or somewhere behind my own thoughts. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it carried a tone that wrapped around me like cold fingers. "You're early." The figure's expression didn't change. But something in the air shifted, like a deep sigh from inside the walls. The light from the apartment flickered once, faintly, as though reacting to something only it could sense. My pulse thundered in my ears. I stepped further back, unable to form any coherent thought except this isn't mine anymore. The figure at the door seemed to sense my retreat. It gave the smallest hint of a smile, not joyful, not malicious. Just a soft, resigned acknowledgement. As if it had expected this. As if it had always known how this moment would end. Slowly, silently, it closed the door. The latch clicked in a way I had never heard before, too smooth, too sure. The hallway felt colder. The rain outside tapped harder against the window at the end of the corridor. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the door to my apartment, the place that held my life, my things, my memories, now sealed shut by someone who wore my face. I raised my hand to knock, but something deep in me resisted. A quiet, primal instinct urged me to leave, to walk away from the door that now felt like the entrance to somewhere I no longer belonged. The longer I stared at it, the more a strange certainty settled into me. If I knocked, whoever, whatever, opened that door wouldn't be me. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know which of us was the original. I turned slowly and walked back down the hallway. The elevator hummed softly when I pressed the button. The building seemed to exhale again, as though adjusting to the new shape of things. When the doors closed, I caught the faintest reflection of myself in the metal, pale, shaken, uncertain. Or at least, I hoped it was me. When I reached the lobby, I hesitated. The night outside was dark and damp, the rain falling in gentle, endless threads. I stepped out into it, letting the cold drops settle on my skin, grounding me in something undeniably real. But as I walked down the street, away from the place I once called home, I felt a strange emptiness blooming quietly inside me. An unsettling thought, soft as a whisper, lingered at the edge of my mind. If someone else was living my life now, what life was left for me to return to? And somewhere behind me, high above in the building I just left, a light in my apartment flickered once, as if someone inside had moved. I remember the moment with a strange, quiet clarity, as if it had been sealed in my mind by the weight of something I still don't fully understand. It began on an ordinary evening, the kind that slips by unnoticed in the middle of a long week. I had stopped at a small corner shop on my way home, one of those narrow places with cramped aisles and a faint scent of old cardboard. The kind of shop you only visit when you've forgotten something small: milk, batteries, a pack of gum. I was tired. The day had outlasted me, and the rain outside had only made everything feel heavier. When I reached the counter, the cashier, a young man with headphones hanging around his neck, asked for my ID. It wasn't a strange request. I didn't even think about it. I reached into my wallet automatically, rifling through receipts and old loyalty cards until I found the familiar plastic rectangle. I handed it over without looking. He held it up to the dim light and paused longer than usual. His eyes flicked from the ID to me, then back to the ID again. There was nothing suspicious in his expression, just a faint confusion, a tightening of his eyebrows. "You, changed your hair?" he asked awkwardly. I gave him a tired smile, thinking it was just small talk. "No, not really." He hesitated, then handed the ID back to me. I didn't think much about it, until my eyes landed on the card. It was my ID. But it wasn't my face. For a split second, my mind tried to rearrange what I was seeing into something logical. Maybe I was holding it at a strange angle. Maybe the lighting made it look distorted. Maybe I had grabbed an old card. But none of those explanations held for more than a moment. The photograph staring back at me was not mine. The face looked frighteningly close, like a distant cousin or a version of me from a dream I barely remembered. Same jawline, same eyes, same tilt of the head, but the expression was different. Colder. More deliberate. The face looked like someone who had spent a long time studying me and reconstructing me from memory. The name was mine. The date of birth was mine. The address was mine. But the person in the picture was not me. My fingers tightened around the plastic, and a faint tremor ran down my hand. I tried to laugh it off, but the sound that came out was quiet and hollow. The cashier had already turned away, distracted by something on his phone, leaving me alone in that moment with the impossible thing in my hand. I stepped outside into the rain without remembering to take the change or the receipt. The cool air hit me, grounding me for a moment, but the ID still felt wrong, too solid, too real. I walked a few steps down the sidewalk before stopping under a flickering street lamp. The rain misted through the weak cone of light, giving everything a soft, blurred glow. I held the card up again, hoping for some kind of mistake to reveal itself. The face remained steady, unapologetic, unchanging. I tried to piece together the day, the week, the month. Had I done anything unusual? Had I replaced my ID recently? Had anyone borrowed my wallet? Had there been any time, any gap, where someone could have switched it? Nothing fit. My life had been painfully steady. Work, home, sleep, repeat. There was no room in the routine for something like this. But the truth was undeniable. Someone had issued me an ID with a stranger's face. And that stranger looked like a version of me I didn't recognize. As I stood there under the rain, a slow, unsettling feeling crawled up my spine. Not panic. Something quieter. Like the certainty that something had shifted beneath the surface of my life without my permission. The street around me seemed to stretch further than usual, and the buildings looked subtly different in the wet glow of the lamps, as if the city itself were waiting for me to understand something I wasn't ready to grasp. I stared at the card for so long that the rain began to bead on the plastic, gathering in tiny droplets that distorted the face. Each drop seemed to warp the faint resemblance into something stranger, like the blurred memory of a person I had once been but no longer was. I wiped it dry with my sleeve and slipped it back into my wallet, though the motion felt wrong, like returning something dangerous to a place too close to my body. I walked slowly home, feeling strangely unwelcome in my own city, as though every street and corner had shifted a few degrees without notifying me. The rain softened everything, turning the world into a series of gentle, shimmering reflections that could hide anything. When I reached my apartment building, I hesitated before taking out my keys. The entrance light flickered above me, humming softly, and for a moment I felt certain that if I walked inside, something would be different. The lobby, the staircase, my own door, something would feel slightly wrong, subtly rearranged, just enough for me to notice. Inside, the building was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like someone holding their breath. The hallways echoed faintly as I walked toward my door. Everything looked the same as it always did, and yet the uneasiness in my chest refused to fade. When I reached my door, I paused and touched the ID in my pocket. My hand brushed against the edges through the fabric. My pulse quickened, not in fear, exactly, but in anticipation of something I couldn't name. I unlocked the door slowly and pushed it open. My apartment looked exactly as I'd left it. The soft lamp in the corner cast its familiar warm pool of light. The faint scent of the candle I always burned lingered in the air. My jacket hung neatly on the hook. My shoes rested by the door. But as I stepped inside, something felt undeniably wrong. It was too clean. Not immaculate, just arranged in a way that didn't belong to my habits. The blanket on the couch was folded more neatly than I ever managed. The books on the table were stacked in an order I didn't use. The mug in the sink was turned at an angle I never placed it. Everything was almost right. Almost. As if someone had tried to recreate my life from memory. I stood still in the quiet room, rain tapping softly against the window. For a long moment, I didn't move, barely breathed. The stillness of the place pressed around me like cold air. Then the faintest sound drifted from the bedroom. Not loud. Not sudden. Just the soft creaking of floorboards beneath slow, deliberate steps. My heart stilled. Someone was in my room. Someone moving with the confidence of belonging. I reached for my phone, my breath thin, but my hand froze halfway. A soft voice, my voice, murmured from the bedroom doorway, "Did you forget something?" My blood ran cold. I turned slowly. A figure stood in the dim light, silhouetted by the faint glow of the lamp. It was the face from the ID. The wrong version of me. The almost me. It tilted its head gently, studying me the way you'd study a misplaced object, one that shouldn't be where it is. "You've been gone a while," it said softly. "I wasn't sure when you'd check." The room felt smaller. The air heavier. My pulse slowed, thick and sluggish, as though my body were bracing for a truth it already knew. The figure smiled, calm, familiar. "Don't worry," it whispered. "You'll remember soon." The ID in my pocket felt like it was burning against my leg. And for the first time, I wondered, what if it was never my life to begin with? What if I had been the one living out of place, using someone else's name, someone else's routines, someone else's home, and they were simply coming back to reclaim what was theirs? Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still feel that wrong version of myself watching me from the doorway, waiting patiently for me to understand which one of us doesn't belong. And the most unsettling part? Some nights, I'm not sure it's him. Some nights, I'm not sure it isn't me. I remember the moment so clearly that sometimes I wonder if time folded itself around me, trapping me in that single second over and over again. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing about it was loud or sudden. It was just a quiet evening on a narrow city street, rain falling in thin silver threads, streetlights trembling softly in the wet air, and a strange heaviness that I only recognized in hindsight. I had been walking home, or at least I told myself that's where I was going. In truth, I wasn't thinking much about direction. My mind was foggy from a long day, my thoughts drifting between the sound of rain and the comfort a warm apartment might give. The street was nearly empty, save for the occasional distant hum of a passing car. Everything felt muted and gentle, wrapped in the softness of the weather. Then I saw her. She came from the other end of the street, alone, walking steadily, her umbrella tilted just slightly to one side so her face wasn't fully visible. There was nothing unusual about her. A dark coat. Shoes glistening with rain. Hair tucked around her ears. We might have passed each other without a second thought on any other night. The city is full of quick, forgettable crossings between strangers. But something about the way she moved made me slow down without realizing it. It wasn't that she looked at me. It was the opposite, really. She seemed to be searching for something on the ground, in the rain, in the misted glow of the lamps. As if she were following a path only she could see. When she finally lifted her eyes, they met mine in a still, measured moment. And I felt something shift. Not in the air. In me. Her expression didn't change much. It wasn't shock, recognition, or fear. It was something softer, understanding, maybe. As though she had been expecting me, though we had never met. I slowed my steps. She did not slow hers. We approached each other like two lines meant to cross exactly once. Just as she passed beside me, she tilted her head slightly, just enough to speak in a low, calm voice. "You don't exist anymore." No emotion. No warning. No urgency. Just a simple truth stated in the same tone one might use to tell you the time or remind you that you left something behind. I stopped walking immediately. The rain filled the space where her words had been. My breath caught in my throat, not because I believed her, at least not in that first second, but because something inside me reacted before my mind did. Something deeper. Something that recognized those words with a kind of hollow certainty. I turned quickly, instinctively, but she had already walked several steps past me. Her umbrella bobbed gently as she continued forward. She didn't look back. She didn't slow down. It was as though those 5 words had been meant to be delivered and nothing more. I felt the street expand around me, quiet, empty, strangely distant. I waited for the shock to settle in, for the fear to rise, for my rational mind to push the moment away as something bizarre and meaningless. But instead, a cold calm settled over me. I tried to think of something grounding. My name. My address. My face in the mirror. And in those few seconds, something horrifying happened. My mind hesitated. Not a full blank. Not a complete void. But something stuttered, like a light flickering, like a memory shying away from being held too tightly. My name felt distant on my tongue. My home seemed fogged out at the edges. I could recall the broad strokes, but the details softened, blurred, as though they were being erased gently, carefully, without my consent. A faint whisper of wind moved through the narrow street, brushing past me as if to confirm her words. You don't exist anymore. I tried to steady my breathing. I pulled my jacket closer, letting the rain tap gently against my hair and shoulders. Everything around me remained exactly the same, the shops closed for the night, the flickering street lamp, the silent windows above. Normal. Familiar. But I didn't feel familiar to myself. I forced myself to take a few steps. My shoes splashed in the thin puddles gathering in the cracks of the pavement. The sound felt muted. Like it belonged to someone else. I reached instinctively for my phone, wanting proof, something to anchor myself. The screen lit up. It was warm and bright and real. But when I looked at the notifications, they felt strangely detached. Messages from people I knew, yet each one looked like it had been sent to someone else. Someone I was supposed to be. Someone whose life I had stepped into without earning it. I opened the camera. My face appeared on the screen. At first glance, everything seemed normal, the same tired eyes, the same faint crease between my brows. But there was something slightly off in the way the reflection moved, like a half-second lag between thought and expression. The rain softened everything, blurring the edges of the world, making my reflection look like it was dissolving into the night. You don't exist anymore. Her voice replayed in my mind, calm and unhurried. I looked down the street where she had gone. She was gone now, vanished into the soft gray curtain of rain. It felt as though she had never been there at all. But her words rooted themselves deeper, like seeds planted in soil I hadn't realized was already broken open. As I walked the rest of the way home, every sound and shadow felt like it watched me with quiet curiosity. The city seemed to shift around me, subtly rearranging itself like a room being made ready for a new tenant. When I reached my building, I hesitated. Was this still my home? The key fit into the lock. The door opened. Everything looked as it should have. But I stood in the doorway for a long moment, listening to the echo of her words settling into the quiet emptiness of my apartment. At some point, I stepped inside. The air felt colder than usual, as though it had been waiting for me to arrive and decide whether or not I belonged there. Even now, I don't fully understand what happened that night. Or what she meant. Sometimes I think she mistook me for someone else. Sometimes I think it was a cruel joke. But on quiet nights, when the rain taps softly against my windows, a strange thought creeps in. What if she didn't mean I had died, or disappeared, or been forgotten? What if she meant something else, something deeper, something quieter, something I haven't yet had the courage to face? Because some nights, when I catch my reflection in the darkened glass, it looks back at me like someone I used to know. I remember the night with a kind of soft, lingering clarity, quiet rain tapping gently against windows, streetlights shimmering in puddles, and that faint smell of damp concrete that settles into a city after hours of steady drizzle. It was late enough that the streets had emptied out, but early enough that the world still felt half awake, like the city was drifting lazily between breaths. I had been walking for longer than I intended, my jacket slowly growing damp, my thoughts trailing behind me somewhere in the soft soundscape of rain. Nothing about the night felt strange at first. Nothing warned me that something subtle and quiet had shifted beneath the surface of my life. It was only when I reached into my pocket, pulled out the folded city map I kept buried there, and opened it under the glow of a flickering street lamp that the first quiet tremor of wrongness slid through me. My street was there. But my building was gone. Not mislabeled. Not renamed. Not shifted down the block. Gone. The map showed the familiar grid, the winding route I walked nearly every day, the tiny park 3 blocks from my front door, the intersection where the crossing light always lagged, the diagonal line of the rail tracks, everything in its place. Except for the one thing that mattered. Where my building should have been, where it had stood since the day I moved in, a tall brick structure with a chipped blue door, there was nothing but a blank space. An unmarked void. A silence on paper where my home should be. I stared at the map for a long time, rain dots slowly blurring the edges, trying to understand. At first, I thought I must have misread it. Maybe I'd unfolded the wrong section. Maybe the creases distorted the lines. Maybe it was too dark, and the flickering lamp above me altered the shadows. I flattened the map against my palm, smoothed the damp paper, and traced the grid with my fingertip, slowly and deliberately. My street. My block. My corner. But the little rectangular symbol that represented my building was missing, cleanly erased, as if it had never existed at all. A strange, careful sort of panic began to unfurl in my chest, a panic that didn't shove or scream, but sank slowly and quietly, like cold water filling a room from the bottom up. I folded the map again, though my fingers trembled slightly now, and looked down the empty street, expecting, hoping, to see the familiar shape of my building in the near distance. But the rain made everything look softened and watery, turning the street into a long, wavering corridor of dark shapes and half-formed silhouettes. Nothing was immediately recognizable. For a moment, I wondered if I had walked too far without noticing, if I'd passed my building in a distracted haze. That seemed possible. It had been a tiring week, and I'd been walking to clear my head. So I kept moving. I turned the corner that should have led directly toward my building, a turn I had taken hundreds of times. The kind of turn that becomes muscle memory, something your feet do while your mind is elsewhere. The street I stepped onto felt familiar enough, a narrow stretch with old street lamps, small shuttered stores, and the distant murmur of traffic drifting from somewhere beyond. But something felt slightly rearranged. Not dramatically. Not enough to alarm a normal passerby. Just a subtle shift in the way the shadows fell, in the spacing of the storefronts, in the rhythm of the quiet. My building should have been visible at the first bend, its top floor jutting above the others. But when I reached that bend, the street continued differently than it should have, as if it had been extended, drawn out like a thread pulled gently from a sweater. I slowed down. The rain fell steadily now, pattering against my shoulders, whispering in my ears, filling the silence with a soft white noise that made the world feel strangely intimate. I took a few more steps, each one accompanied by the growing sense that something was gently resisting me, not physically, but in the way the air thickened around me. I finally stopped beneath another street lamp and unfolded the map again, letting the light illuminate it. My building was still missing. The blank space was still there. A small void in the carefully drawn world. The lamp above me flickered and hummed, and for a moment the edges of the map seemed to twitch, like the ink might shift if I blinked. I turned slowly, scanning the quiet street behind me, then the one ahead. Everything looked real. Everything looked tangible. But nothing felt settled. A strange thought formed quietly, what if the map wasn't wrong? What if I was? I closed the map and slipped it back into my pocket, telling myself that exhaustion was making me paranoid. I had lived in that building for years. I knew every crack in the sidewalk leading to the entrance. I knew the imperfect angle of the brickwork. I knew the weak bulb in the lobby that flickered every couple of weeks. All I had to do was walk a little more. Turn another corner. The rain makes everything look unfamiliar. That's all. But the further I walked, the more the city shifted around me in quiet, unsettling ways. The deli that should have been at the end of the block wasn't there. In its place was a laundromat I'd never seen before, its neon sign sputtering weakly against the rain. Across the street, the bakery that always smelled like warm bread had turned into a dark storefront with no lettering at all. The tree that grew near my building's entrance, a tall elm with peeling bark, was nowhere to be seen. Yet nothing looked abandoned or decayed. Nothing hinted at sudden change. It all looked settled. As if it had been this way for a very long time. When I finally reached the spot where my building should have stood, a place I knew as intimately as the back of my hand, my breath caught. There was no building. Not mine. Not anything. An empty lot stretched before me. Not messy or overgrown. Just a smooth, flat expanse of concrete with faint outlines where something might have once been. It was unnervingly clean, almost sterile, like a space prepared for something that hadn't arrived yet. The rain fell silently onto the lot, darkening it in wide patches. A thin mist curled along its edges where the warm air met the cold surface. The fencing that surrounded it looked old, rusted in places, chipped in others, as if it had been standing there for years. But that made no sense. There had been a building here this morning. I had locked my door when I left. I had walked down the stairs, stepped onto the sidewalk, and glanced up at my windows, just as I always did. I stood there for a long moment, the rain seeping deeper into my clothes, feeling the quiet weight of the empty space pressing against me. The lot felt expectant. As though it was waiting for something to happen. Or for something to return. A faint sound drifted through the rain then, barely audible. A soft shuffle, like someone stepping lightly on wet ground. I turned quickly, scanning the street behind me, but saw only the dim glow of the lamps and the shimmering outlines of buildings. Then I heard it again. Closer. It came from the empty lot. I stepped toward the fence, gripping the cold metal with wet fingers, and peered into the mist. For a moment, I saw only rain and concrete. And then, a faint shape. A figure. Standing exactly where my living room should have been. It wasn't clear. Not fully formed. Just a pale outline, like a ghost drawn in the fog, or a memory projected against the rain. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It simply stood, facing me. My heart pounded, but the fear was muted, quiet and heavy, like everything else that night. I took a step closer, my hand tightening around the fence. The figure didn't react. It didn't need to. Its presence alone told me what I had been trying not to understand. My building wasn't gone. I was. Or rather, the version of me that belonged to this block, this street, this city, the one anchored in place, had slipped out of alignment somehow. I stepped back, breathing shakily. The figure blurred further into the rain, dissolving like steam. The lot grew quiet again, holding its breath as if nothing had happened. I don't remember how long I stood there before I finally walked away. The rain softened everything, swallowing the edges of the city, turning every sound into something half-remembered. The map in my pocket felt heavier now, as though it carried more than paper and ink. Sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I can still see the shape standing on that empty concrete. Still, silent, waiting. And sometimes, when I unfold the map again, I notice something else missing. A street. A shop. A corner I used to know. Piece by piece, the city is rewriting itself. Piece by piece, it is forgetting me. Or maybe, just maybe, it's reminding me that the place I believed I belonged to was never truly mine to begin with. I remember that morning with a strange, lingering clarity, like a faint imprint left on the inside of my mind, soft and unsettling. It wasn't a dramatic morning. Nothing stormy or unusual. Just a gray, quiet dawn where the sky looked half awake, and the air felt cool enough to make me breathe a little deeper as I walked. The office building was the same as always, tall, slightly worn, humming faintly with electricity. I'd walked through its glass doors countless times, passing the security desk on autopilot, barely noticing the flickering light above the elevator or the soft tapping of rain against the windows. But that morning, something felt thinner. As if the air had lost its weight. As if the building was watching me arrive instead of simply absorbing me the way it always did. I pressed the elevator button, rode up to the 7th floor, and felt the familiar shift of the doors opening onto the quiet hallway. The carpet muffled my footsteps. The hum of computers leaked faintly from inside various offices. It all felt normal. Comforting, even. I walked to my desk, set down my bag, woke up my computer, and typed my username. Then my password. Then waited. And waited. A soft chime. A blinking message. User not found. I frowned at the screen. I had mistyped my password before, everyone does. But my username? Impossible. I typed it again. Slower. More carefully. I even whispered the letters to myself under my breath, making sure I didn't miss a single keystroke. User not found. Maybe the system was having issues. It happened from time to time. So I rebooted. The startup sequence felt somehow longer than usual, each loading icon pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. When the login screen appeared again, I felt a small sense of relief. I typed my name once more. And once more the system rejected it. It was subtle at first, the feeling that began to creep up my spine. A sort of quiet, hollow opening. Like a small door somewhere in my mind had swung inward and revealed a dark space behind it. I sat there staring at the screen for a while, feeling more embarrassed than afraid. Maybe IT had messed something up. Maybe a system update wiped a few accounts by accident. But the embarrassment dissolved quickly when I opened the employee directory. My name wasn't there. Not misspelled. Not misplaced. Not hidden behind a filter. It simply didn't exist. As if I had never worked there a single day in my life. I sat very still, my fingers hovering above the keyboard, listening to the soft hum of the office swell around me. The sound felt different, like a low, distant current rather than background noise. I looked around slowly. A few people were at their desks. The woman in the corner was sipping coffee. The guy from accounting clicked through spreadsheets. Everything looked normal. Everything looked the same. Until it didn't. I realized, slowly, that no one had greeted me that morning. They always did, even if just with a nod. But today, not a single glance had come my way. It was like I had drifted into the room without the air shifting around me. I stood up and approached the nearest coworker, Daniel, someone I'd chatted with almost every day for nearly a year. I waited for him to look up. He didn't. I said his name softly. Daniel? Nothing. I cleared my throat and spoke louder. Hey, Daniel, can I ask you something? He continued typing. Not a pause. Not a flicker of recognition. Not even the smallest sign that he had heard me. The office buzzed softly around us, an ocean of quiet activity, but none of it touched me. I stepped back from his desk, heart thudding with a confused heaviness. I walked toward the break room. The fluorescent light buzzed above me as I stepped inside. A few people stood near the coffee machine, chatting softly. I approached them and said hello. No response. I said it again. Louder. Nothing. Not even a glance. It felt like the room had turned slightly off-center, like the walls had shifted a few fractions of an inch without making a sound. A few drops of rain slid down the windowpane behind me, soft and rhythmic, almost like a whisper brushing against the glass. I stood there with my coffee cup in hand, not knowing what to do next. My thoughts were scattered, half logic, half instinct. Was I dreaming? Sleepwalking? Was something wrong with me? Or, worse, something wrong with the world? My mind kept repeating the message from the computer. User not found. I left the break room and walked quickly back to my desk, as if something would make sense once I sat down again. My monitor glowed softly in the dim office lighting. I opened the employee directory for a second time. Then a third. My name simply wasn't there. It was as if the database had never known I existed at all. On a desperate impulse, I opened my email and tried composing a message, to myself. When I typed my address, the autocomplete didn't appear. I typed it manually. Recipient does not exist. A cold, heavy feeling settled into my chest. I leaned back in my chair, feeling suddenly lightheaded. The office around me went on as usual, phones ringing, keyboards clicking, quiet conversations drifting through the air, but none of it felt connected to me anymore. I was sitting inside a world that had quietly moved on without me. A place that looked like my life, sounded like my life, but no longer acknowledged my presence in it. I logged into my bank app. Account not found. I checked my phone contacts. My own number was missing. I tried calling myself out of sheer panic. Number no longer in service. I felt a sharp sting behind my eyes, a sense of displacement so heavy it made my vision blur. I grabbed my bag and hurried out of the office, down the hall, and into the elevator. The doors closed slowly, their reflection showing me, still there, still solid, still breathing. But something in my reflection felt wrong. Not different in shape. Different in presence. As if the mirror were struggling to hold on to me. I stepped outside into the rain, letting the cool drops cling to my skin. The city felt dimmer than usual, as though the edges of buildings were softening. People walked past, umbrellas bobbing, shoes splashing through puddles. Not a single one looked at me. Not one. I walked home as quickly as I could, my breath shallow, my thoughts circling like trapped birds. When I reached my building, my key slid into the lock perfectly. The door opened. My apartment looked the same. Until I noticed the frame on the wall. Inside it was a photo I loved, a simple picture from last summer. But the version of me in the photo looked slightly off. As if the smile belonged to someone else wearing my face. The edges of my world felt thinner. The air felt colder. I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling, and my phone buzzed suddenly with a notification, an unknown number. My heart lurched. I opened it. A single line of text glowed on the screen: "Stop trying to log in. You're not in the system anymore." I stared at the message, unable to breathe. Then another message appeared, slowly, deliberately, as if typed by someone who knew me better than I knew myself: "We've already replaced you." Even now, when I try to fall asleep, I can feel a quiet shift in the room, as though the world is still deciding whether I'm supposed to be here at all. I remember her hand first, the warmth of it against mine, the familiar weight of her fingers weaving effortlessly between my own, the quiet certainty of touch that comes only from someone who has held you many times before. It happened on a soft, rainy evening, the kind of night where the world feels a little dimmer, a little quieter, as though every sound has wrapped itself in a blanket and lowered its voice. The air smelled faintly of wet pavement and blooming jasmine from the small garden outside the station. The street lamps hummed with that low electrical buzz they make when the rain has been going on too long. I had just stepped off the bus, tired and ready to sink into the comfort of home. She was standing near the entrance of the station, still, quiet, almost as if she'd been waiting for something. Or someone. Her hair was damp from the drizzle, her coat darkened at the shoulders, and her eyes were cast downward at her own hands. There was something familiar in the shape of her, something that made my breath catch in my throat for a moment, like the sudden recognition you get when spotting a childhood place from far away. I slowed as I walked past her, not out of curiosity, but because my body reacted before my mind did. It felt like turning toward a memory. And then she lifted her head. Her eyes met mine with a startling clarity, wide, soft, almost relieved. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and gently reached out to take my hand. The movement was so natural, so fluid, that I didn't react at first. It felt like we had done this 1,000 times. The warmth of her fingers seeped through my skin, grounding me in the space between us. For a moment, the sound of rain softened, the world narrowed, and everything felt perfectly, quietly right. But then, her expression changed. The relief faded. Her eyes tightened. Her breath caught. She looked at our joined hands as if seeing them for the first time. And then she whispered, with a trembling voice that made the rain seem suddenly colder, I don't know you. I froze. The words were soft, not fearful, but confused, deeply confused, like someone waking from a dream they didn't understand. She pulled her hand back slowly, almost reluctantly, as though her body disagreed with her mind. Her fingers lingered near mine for a second too long before falling away completely. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought, her voice trailed off. The rain continued its steady whisper around us, but the world felt different now, thinner, fragile, as if one wrong movement might make something break in the darkness. It's okay, I said quietly, though I wasn't sure it was. I wasn't sure of anything. My heart beat loudly in my ears, but not because she was a stranger. Because she wasn't. I knew her. Or at least, I felt like I did. Not in a dramatic, storybook way. Not a sudden recognition of a long-lost lover or someone from a past life. It was subtler, deeper, like the familiar sense of déjà vu that lingers too long, making your skin prickle. Her voice stirred something in me, like the echo of a memory I couldn't fully grasp. Her face, though unfamiliar, tugged at something just beneath the surface. She stepped back, pulling her coat tighter around her. You looked at me like you knew me, she said. Like you'd been waiting. A chill passed through me, not from the cold, but from the uneasy truth in her words. I'm sorry, she said again. I didn't mean to frighten you. But I wasn't frightened. Not exactly. I was shaken, deeply, quietly shaken, as though something inside me had slipped out of alignment. The warmth of her hand still clung to my skin, stubborn and unwilling to fade. I found myself wanting to reach for her again, just to confirm the reality of what I'd felt. The certainty. The familiarity. The sense that her touch had completed a sentence I didn't know I'd been writing. She looked down the street then, her expression tight, uncertain. I should go, she murmured. But she didn't move. Not yet. Instead, her gaze drifted back to mine with a haunted, questioning weight. Why did it feel like I knew you, she whispered, more to herself than to me. I didn't have an answer. The rain thickened around us, settling into a steady rhythm that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. She stepped back once more, her face pale under the dim orange glow of the street lamp. And then she said something that unsettled me more than anything else that night. When I held your hand, she hesitated. I remembered something that didn't happen. A cold shiver slid down my spine. She shook her head slowly, as though trying to dislodge a thought that clung too tightly. A room, she whispered. A white room. And, her breath stilled. Her eyes widened, not with fear, but with recognition. A recognition directed not at me, but at something behind me. I turned instinctively, but the rain-filled street was empty. When I looked back at her, she was stepping away, faster now, her expression tight with something close to dread. I'm sorry, she said. I have to go. Wait, but she was already turning, already walking down the wet street, her footsteps echoing faintly against the stone. She didn't look back. Not once. I watched her disappear into the mist and rain, feeling the lingering warmth on my hand slowly fade into something hollow. I walked home with that emptiness clinging to me, unable to shake the certainty that something had passed between us, something hidden, something neither of us understood. That night, long after the rain stopped, I lay awake replaying the moment her hand touched mine. And every time I did, I felt that same strange warmth, and that same unsettling image, a white room. Two shadows standing close. Hands intertwined. A memory that didn't belong to me. Except, somewhere deep inside, it did. And now, when I pass that station at night, when the rain begins to fall again, I swear I feel the ghost of a hand slipping gently into mine, warm, familiar, and belonging to someone who swears she's never met me before.